Today, I'd like for us to talk about balancing your tech consumption and creation for your students. This is an important topic that doesn't get covered nearly enough, that we need to think about very intentionally how we put tech into kids' hands and what it's being used for. Before we get there, though, let's talk about what learning is like. So back many years ago, probably it's going on 50 years ago now, if you can believe this was actually in the 70s, computers that are as powerful as what you're watching this on right now would take up entire rooms and floors of universities and the establishments that had these computers. And despite being massive machines, they were not able to store things. And so as you see on the right there's what's called a punch card, and this is what used to be used to insert commands into these computers and to be able to store information, since the limited information, the storage that was there in the first place, was reserved for mainly the operating system and for higher level users. Not like today where you can have quite a bit of storage on your local device. And so if you wanted the computer to remember something for you, you'd have to take these cards that are punched in order to stick them into the machine for the computer to remember it. But here's the thing. We think about kids in the same way, and learning does actually not work that way. We cannot just take pieces of information and expect to insert them like those punch cards that came with the old computers to have kids remember them. Learning does not work that way. Learning is an active process, and it has to be active in the way that we have kids acquire knowledge. Kids have to do things with knowledge. It has to be involved in moving and shaking and doing things, creating their own schema of what the concepts are. It's not as easy as just it comes out of here and it sticks in here. It doesn't work that way. You have to do things with information to make knowledge. See the punch cards going on the top of the kid's head, it's just not going to work that way. So that's the way we need to think about our use of technology as well too. Technology consumption or creation is about the directionality and the flow of information. When we have consumption that we most often have kids into, the flow of information is from the technology into the student. And so it's usually a unidirectional flow of information. It's coming to the student. Whereas creation, the flow of information is coming from the student. The student is using what's up here to create representations of learning, to put information out into the world, to put their knowledge out into the world, their understanding out there. And beyond the two C's there, creation and consumption, I like to add rehearsal, which is a little bit in between. It's not quite consumption, but it's not creation at the same point. It's not creating representations of knowledge, and it's not sitting and letting things take in. You're actually doing things with knowledge, but you're not creating representations. So some examples here of what consumption would be. Anytime you have a kid sit down and watch a video, consumption. When you have them read a blog or an online article, that's consumption. Listening to a podcast, watching an online lecture asynchronously, or playing an online game that is not objective related. You think about the times when you go into the pediatrician's office and you have the student or the kid that's surrounded the parent's phone to try and have the kid just be quiet or behave when they're sitting waiting in the lobby there. That's consumption. The objective of that use of technology is not to arrive at something, it's to pass time or to have the kid be entertained. So some examples of rehearsal. When you complete an online quiz, again, it's not that the information is coming this direction, the information is going that way, but it's not quite creation yet. Doing an online worksheet, playing an online learning game, doing an online bell ringer, doing an online worksheet. Notice the thing about all of those is that they're very closed in nature, in that there's very finite, specific, correct answers that you're looking for. Creation, on the other hand, is creating representations of the knowledge that's inside of here. This could be creating a new media representation of topics, such as a podcast, video, blog, or post. Creating a slide deck and explaining the topic. All those jigsaw type activities, those are definitely creation. STEM creation, developing visual representation of a topic, which could be artwork. Teaching another peer about a topic is creation. Writing response to an open-ended question is also creation. Even though it is not incredibly difficult tech to do, having it be open-ended and creating a representation of your knowledge where there's multiple correct answers is creation. And so, as I had alluded to, creation is best suited for open-ended problems since individuals' interpretation of knowledge is different. You have to put them in situations where there can be many, many correct answers or many different ways to express the knowledge that they have to get to creation. If you just want a simple correct answer of one word, of 2 words, creation's not it. And we should also note that creation is almost exclusively synonymous with getting to the higher order levels of Bloom's taxonomy. The evaluation, synthesis, analysis. If the objective of your task and your objective period are into those higher level Blooms, then you're going to need creation to be able to show that knowledge, that creation of knowledge, that representation of knowledge based upon the objective. The way I urge you to think about creation versus consumption is a lot like what you would do when it comes to your own diet. Now, I grew up having the Dietary Pyramid as my model, not the plate, so I really haven't latched onto this one. But you think about when you think about your diet, you need to have a balance of lots of different parts. You have fruits, vegetables, grains, protein. You notice that the protein is smaller than the vegetables. What we used to have in the pyramid was the fats and lipids as well too, and it was the smaller part of the triangle, which it didn't say you can't ever eat fats, sweets, sugars. You said to eat them in moderation. And the same thing we should think about consumption and creation of tech. Think about it as if it were a diet. We need to look at that diet. So the best way for us to do this is to keep a log of what you do in a class, a period, a day, a week. Take everything, all of the activities that are inside of your lessons, and code them. Put them into one of 3 categories: consumption, rehearsal, and creation. Once you've coded those and you put them in the right columns there, you want to add in the amount of time it takes for each. So you can find the total amount of time that you're spending on consuming through the use of technology, rehearsing through the use of technology, and creating through the use of technology. And a good rule of thumb is to then add up your creation and rehearsal. That number should be greater than consumption, or consumption should be less than the combination of your rehearsal and creation. Again, this is predicated upon the thought that kids are not antiquated computers where we could punch cards into their head and they remember things. They have to do things with that information. So as an example of keeping a log, like your dietary log, your students' tech consumption. In this lesson, they watched a lesson video. This one here basically is a station rotation model. They watch the lesson video, then they do a monitored worksheet completion, which would be online, thus being inside of this table. Anything that's not tech related, you would not put inside of this table, by the way. And then after that, they would do a relevance activity with student empowerment where they have a voice and they can create representations of learning. That takes 15 minutes. And then you have an exit ticket, which has a closed answer that's posted online. Let's say this could be a Kahoot, quizzes, game kit. So that's 5 minutes. We have a total of 15 minutes spent on consumption and a total of 35 minutes being spent on rehearsal and creation. So we have a good balance there. Kids are consuming less than they're rehearsing and creating. Another example of a lesson here is what makes me think about some of my college career. You have a Zoom lecture for 30 minutes, and then you go over worked problems where the teacher is showing how to solve problems for 15 minutes. So just sitting there watching most of the time. And then an exit ticket to leave, which is 5 minutes. You have 45 minutes of consumption and 5 minutes of rehearsal. Those numbers are way out of whack. We got to bring somehow that over from sitting and being passive observers of learning to active creators of learning and using technology for the real empowerment reasons of using technology. Another lesson here. This one, instead of watching a video, they read an online article. And then after they're done with that, they answer 10 minutes of questions that are in Google Classroom. And then after that point, they create a book review video or an online article review video. And that one takes 20 minutes. So again, I want you to think about consumption and rehearsal not being bad. It's in moderation, and it is steps along the path. There's stops, there are checkpoints along the map of where you want to get to. It's not that it's bad, it's just you're not quite there yet. So we look at our ratio there. We have 20 minutes of consumption to 30 minutes of creation and rehearsal. That's a pretty good mixture there. It's spending more time working with knowledge and creating the knowledge than it is to being a sitting passive observer, even if it is reading. So you can get a copy of that sheet, a Google sheet of that form at that link that's right there. And so again, I don't want you to think that consumption is bad, rather over consumption is bad. Having kids simply sit and watch or sit and do things that are not related to the objective are bad. In the same way in your diet, it is okay to have a candy so long as you're not eating all candy and only candy, and it comprises the greatest part of your diet. And again, think about consumption not as a bad thing, but it's a checkpoint on the path towards creation, towards deeper, higher level understanding. It's not that you should avoid consumption. It's to keep on going. Keep going. You're the first step along the path. And so once you've balanced your consumption and rehearsal creation, and you get a feel about what it means to use technology in the best intentions of creation and rehearsing, then you should start looking at that number of rehearsal versus creation. We got our consumption creation balance, but now we need to look at how much we're spending just rehearsing, spitting back lower level blooms, and start looking at how we can get kids to creating, and that's higher level blooms. To look at a greater balance between those two items as well. And so with that, I hope that you now can start being introspective about how you use technology with your students and to have a greater balance between the consumption and the creation of knowledge.